Viper ruled Liverpool's streets with fear and precision, a woman whose name alone could make criminals pause. Behind the glittering facades of the city, she orchestrated disappearances, violent turf wars, and a criminal empire that even the police feared to touch. This is the story of the city's darkest nights, where loyalty was deadly, betrayal was inevitable, and no one was ever truly safe. Liverpool's waterfront, bustling and lively by day, transformed into a city of shadows as night fell. The glow of street lamps flickered over the cobblestones, casting long, wavering silhouettes that made every alley seem alive. The docks, normally a hive of workers unloading cargo and tourists enjoying the riverside, became a hidden maze of danger. Shipping containers stacked like giant metal blocks created secret corridors, where illicit deals could be made far from prying eyes. The faint hum of distant traffic mixed with the lapping of water against the quay, forming a soundtrack for a city that many had learned to fear after dark. For years, whispers of illegal activity had drifted through Liverpool's backstreets. Smuggling, drug trade, and underground gambling rings were known only in fragments, mentioned cautiously in hushed conversations among locals. Residents had grown accustomed to avoiding certain streets at night, sensing something was off without fully understanding why. But the true scale of the city's underworld remained hidden, even from the authorities. Only in retrospect would the patterns become clear, a network of criminals quietly ruling large parts of the city, leaving chaos and fear in their wake. It was not the kind of city that admitted its secrets easily. Ordinary citizens walked home under dim streetlights, clutching their bags and avoiding eye contact with strangers. The occasional distant shout or the screech of tires made the heart race. Yet for those involved in the underworld, the night offered opportunity and power. Dock workers who had long resigned themselves to the city's harsh realities spoke of suspicious deliveries that arrived late at night, of men in expensive suits meeting in abandoned warehouses, and of small boats slipping silently down the Mersey under the cover of darkness. The police had tried to keep pace, but corruption and fear had slowed their efforts. Officers patrolling the docks often reported feeling watched, and some began avoiding late-night shifts entirely. Surveillance cameras occasionally captured blurred figures moving quickly, yet those images rarely led to arrests. There was always someone one step ahead, someone who knew the city's streets better than those who sought to enforce the law. Yet, even among the shadows, the city had a strange rhythm. The dimly lit streets held a quiet energy, as if the darkness itself was alive. Hidden staircases behind old warehouses led to secret rooms where deals were made, and basements beneath crumbling pubs served as meeting points for those who lived in the city's underworld. Liverpool by night was a labyrinth, a place where trust was scarce and danger could appear at any turn. It was in these conditions that the city's most cunning criminals thrived, learning to blend in, observing ordinary life while plotting acts of violence and deception just beyond the eyes of the public. And yet, despite the fear and violence, there was an undeniable allure. The docks, the alleys, the faint smell of the river mingling with the cold night air. It drew people in, daring them to step closer, even as danger lurked in every shadow. In Liverpool, the night held stories that were darker and stranger than anyone could imagine, waiting for those bold or foolish enough to uncover them. At the heart of Liverpool's dark nights was a woman who seemed to move through the city like a ghost, unseen but everywhere. Known only by the street name Viper, she had carved a reputation that sent shivers through the criminal underworld. Her rise to power was as unexpected as it was ruthless. Born into poverty, she had learned early that survival required cunning, courage, and a willingness to do what others could not. While other children played in the streets, she observed patterns: who to trust, who to fear, and who could be used to climb higher. By the time she reached adulthood, Viper was no longer just surviving, she was calculating, orchestrating, and slowly taking control. Her influence stretched across Liverpool's neighborhoods. Backstreet clubs and abandoned warehouses were only the visible edges of her empire. Nightclubs downtown, prestigious by day and dangerous by night, became her meeting grounds for deals that decided the fate of rival gangs. She moved among wealthy patrons and ordinary citizens with the same calm demeanor, a mask that concealed the iron grip she held over the city's illicit trades. No one suspected that the glamorous figure attending charity galas and business events by day was the same person who orchestrated violent attacks and smuggling operations after dark. Viper's power came not from brute strength, but from intelligence and fear. She built networks of loyal lieutenants, each one carefully selected for their skills, ruthlessness, and discretion. Those who betrayed her vanished without warning, their disappearance serving as a warning to anyone who might consider defiance. Violence was not random, it was precise, controlled, and always purposeful. Rumors of her methods spread quickly, often exaggerated, yet even the stories that survived were chilling enough to keep competitors wary. Despite her infamy, Viper remained invisible to law enforcement for years. Police investigations often hit dead ends, confounded by the layers of deception she constructed. False identities, coded messages, and clandestine meetings made it nearly impossible to track her operations. Even when raids occurred, they often yielded only minor arrests or trivial evidence, leaving the true mastermind untouched. She had learned to exploit weaknesses in the system, understanding that patience and timing were more powerful weapons than guns or knives. Yet, Viper's rise was not without risk. Rival gangs constantly sought to challenge her, believing that one misstep could topple her empire. Some attempted violent takeovers, others tried infiltration, and a few even attempted assassination. Each attack was met with a calculated response that left her opponents humiliated, punished, or removed entirely. Her reputation grew, not just as a criminal but as a strategist, who could anticipate every move, turning potential threats into opportunities for control. What made Viper truly terrifying was her ability to walk unnoticed in plain sight. She was part of the city, intertwined with its daily life, and yet untouchable. The people of Liverpool, aware of her power, often whispered her name with a mixture of fear and awe, never fully understanding the scope of her influence. Her story was one of cunning ambition and calculated cruelty, a reminder that in the city's shadows, appearances were never what they seemed, and the true rulers moved silently, shaping the fate of everyone around them without leaving a trace. Liverpool's streets were alive with a rhythm that most outsiders could never understand, but the city's backstreets told a far darker story. Violence had begun creeping into neighborhoods that had once been considered safe, and the terror was precise, deliberate, and unrelenting. Murders erupted suddenly, often in the dead of night, leaving residents startled and fearful. It wasn't random chaos. Each act of violence carried a message, a warning to rivals or an assertion of control. The city had become a chessboard, with blood serving as a grim punctuation mark on the moves made by unseen hands. The victims were never the ones who drew attention. Ordinary people, shopkeepers, street vendors, even young men walking home, were caught in the crossfire of a system they could never hope to understand. The backstreets became arenas of power, where disputes over territory, drugs, or money were settled with brutal efficiency. Often the scenes of these crimes were staged, almost artistically, leaving investigators with more questions than answers. A message scrawled in graffiti on a wall, a discarded item left near the body, or the placement of the corpse itself, all carried meaning for those who knew how to read it. For everyone else it was terror in its rawest form. The police struggled to keep up. Patrols were frequent, but the criminals were faster, smarter, and always prepared. CCTV footage often captured fleeting shadows or blurred figures moving too quickly to identify. Even witnesses, terrified of retaliation, often stayed silent, choosing survival over justice. Newspapers reported sporadically, wary of the danger in documenting crimes that seemed to reach higher and higher into the city's underworld. Fear spread like wildfire, and residents learned to adapt, locking doors earlier, avoiding certain streets, and keeping their heads down. Amidst the violence, rival gangs emerged like shadows mirroring Viper's own empire. Each group was desperate to carve out territory, to prove dominance, or to avenge a fallen member. Turf wars became frequent, erupting with sudden intensity and vanishing just as quickly, leaving behind shattered windows, bloodstains, and a sense of unease that never dissipated. Neighbors whispered about who had been attacked and why, piecing together stories that the police could not confirm, while children grew up understanding that the city's darkness was something to be navigated carefully. The murders and turf wars were only one part of the story. Liverpool's crime capital reputation was also fueled by disappearances, arson, and organized theft. Residents began to realize that no place was truly safe, that violence could strike in the quietest moments, and that the streets themselves held secrets that no one dared speak aloud. Even those who believed they were untouchable, living seemingly ordinary lives, could become pawns in a game far bigger than themselves. Yet the city's underworld thrived, not just because of fear, but because it had become a self-sustaining ecosystem. Corruption, loyalty, and betrayal coexisted in a delicate balance, creating a cycle of power that was almost impossible to break. Each crime, each violent act, reinforced the idea that Liverpool was a city ruled by shadows, and that survival depended on understanding the rules of a game few could see. The backstreets held stories of pain, strategy, and brutality, and anyone who ventured too close risked becoming part of a narrative they could never escape. Liverpool's nights had already become a city of shadows, but as the disappearances began, fear took on a new, almost tangible shape. People vanished without warning or explanation, leaving behind only questions and shattered families. Shop owners closed their businesses earlier than usual, neighbors stopped talking openly in their streets, and the city seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next name to be whispered into silence. It was not random, nor was it chaotic. Each disappearance carried a signature, a method that suggested organization and intelligence far beyond petty crime. The unknown perpetrators were meticulous, leaving almost no trace behind. Authorities soon discovered that these were not simple cases of runaway residents or minor gang conflicts. The missing were taken with precision, almost as if selected for specific reasons known only to their captors. Investigators began to piece together a disturbing pattern: the locations of abductions, the times they occurred, and even the backgrounds of those targeted suggested a plan, a sinister design that reached deep into the city's hidden corners. Abandoned warehouses, old factories, and unused basements became silent prisons, spaces where victims were kept for reasons no one could initially understand. Each location was chosen for secrecy, accessibility, and the ability to disappear from sight at a moment's notice. The families of the missing lived in a constant state of anxiety. Calls to police often went unanswered, or investigations stallowed in bureaucracy and fear. The media, aware of the danger, reported only fragments of stories, leaving the public with speculation and dread. It wasn't long before whispers began circulating about secret societies and criminal overlords orchestrating events from the shadows. People began to suspect that those in power, both in the underworld and in law enforcement, might be complicit, whether through corruption, fear, or calculated silence. But what truly shook investigators was what they found hidden within some of these locations. Cryptic symbols and coded messages were scrawled across walls or etched into floors, suggesting that the disappearances were not random acts of violence, but part of a larger, more sinister plan. These symbols hinted at loyalty, betrayal, and a hierarchy that outsiders could barely comprehend. The victims, once thought to be ordinary citizens, were revealed to be pieces in a complex game of power, manipulation, and fear. Each disappearance was both punishment and warning, a demonstration of control over the city's dark underbelly. As more cases came to light, the scale of the operation became undeniable. Entire neighborhoods had been infiltrated, and the networks behind these abductions extended far beyond what anyone had imagined. Informants spoke of hidden tunnels and escape routes, of people being moved silently through the city under cover of darkness. What terrified the police most was the efficiency. No matter how closely they monitored the city, the criminals always seemed one step ahead, leaving only fear and confusion in their wake. Liverpool's streets, already feared at night, became a labyrinth of tension and suspicion. The disappearances left the city questioning itself, doubting who could be trusted, and realizing that the true danger was not visible. The shadows were no longer just a backdrop. They had become active players, controlling lives, shaping the city's future, and leaving secrets that even the brightest investigators struggled to decipher. In Liverpool, the night was no longer just a time of darkness. It was a predator, hunting quietly, and leaving a trail of fear that would take years to understand. Viper's life was a masterclass in deception, a balance between two worlds that seemed impossible to reconcile. By day, she was a respected businesswoman, attending meetings in polished offices, shaking hands with influential figures, and appearing at charity events with a composed smile. To outsiders, she was an example of success born from hard work and determination. Her public persona was flawless, carefully curated, and utterly convincing. No one suspected that beneath the tailored suits and glittering social events lay the ruler of Liverpool's most dangerous criminal empire. The contrast between her two lives was stark, yet Viper navigated it effortlessly, always aware of the delicate threads that connected her public image with her private power. The true scope of her empire was staggering. Drug trafficking, smuggling, illegal gambling, and extortion were only the surface. Her influence extended into the city's most respected institutions, and even the police often found themselves unable to act against her due to lack of evidence or fear of exposure. Viper had mastered the art of invisibility in plain sight, using her charm, intelligence, and calculated manipulation to maintain control. Those who believed they were her allies often discovered, too late, that loyalty in her world was measured in usefulness rather than trust. Viper's power was reinforced by a network of lieutenants, each chosen for specific skills. Some were enforcers, capable of brutal precision when needed, while others managed logistics, finances, and communication. She demanded absolute obedience, but she also rewarded loyalty with wealth, protection, and influence, creating a system in which betrayal was rare but devastating when it occurred. Her lieutenants feared her, respected her, and in some cases genuinely admired her cunning. Each decision she made, each risk she took, was calculated to ensure that her empire remained untouchable and that those around her remained dependent on her guidance. Even with such power, Viper's life was not without danger. Rival gangs constantly tested her authority, attempting infiltration or challenging her control over key territories. Attempts on her empire were met with swift, ruthless responses that served as both punishment and deterrent. She orchestrated each reaction with precision, ensuring that her reputation as untouchable grew while her enemies were weakened or eliminated. To her, violence was a tool, a necessary language to communicate power and maintain dominance over a city that thrived on chaos. What made Viper most formidable was her ability to anticipate. She understood the patterns of law enforcement, the ambitions of rival gangs, and even the behaviors of ordinary citizens. Every meeting, every transaction, every minor act of defiance was analyzed for potential risk. This foresight allowed her to stay one step ahead, avoiding capture and ensuring her influence extended beyond the visible reach of the police or the press. Yet, even as she maintained control, there was a tension that hung over her world. Every empire eventually faces cracks, and the slightest mistake could unravel everything she had built. But Viper thrived in this tension, using it to sharpen her instincts and tighten her control. The city's people, unaware of the dual life she led, continued their routines, oblivious to the fact that the woman smiling at a charity gala was the same person orchestrating disappearances, violence, and fear under the cover of darkness. Liverpool had never seen someone like her, and for the city's underworld, that made her both a symbol of fear and a force impossible to ignore. No empire lasts forever, and even Viper's carefully constructed reign began to show signs of fragility. The cracks appeared first in whispers, in fleeting moments when trusted lieutenants hesitated or rival gang members moved too freely. One of her closest aides, a man who had been with her since the early days, began communicating with competitors, passing along fragments of her plans, unknowingly setting a chain reaction in motion. The betrayal was subtle at first, missed meetings, unexplained delays, minor leaks of information, but it soon escalated into open threats and violent confrontations. Viper, who had built her power on precision and foresight, now faced the terrifying reality that the very people she trusted could undermine everything she had achieved. The tension within her organization grew rapidly. Meetings that were once calm and calculated became charged with suspicion and fear. Lieutenants who had followed her unquestioningly now cast wary glances, unsure who was loyal and who had been corrupted. Viper's genius was in her ability to recognize these fissures before they became disasters. She responded with a calculated combination of intimidation, strategic alliances, and selective punishment, reinforcing her authority while simultaneously rooting out potential threats. Every move was measured, designed not only to maintain control but to instill fear in those who dared consider betrayal. Meanwhile, rival gangs sensed opportunity in the chaos. The city's criminal underworld, usually subdued by the shadow of Viper's influence, began to assert itself more aggressively. Turf wars erupted with renewed intensity, smuggling routes were contested, and violence spiked in neighborhoods that had previously been quiet. Police forces, long frustrated by the precision and elusiveness of Viper's empire, saw a chance to exploit these cracks. Surveillance increased, undercover operations multiplied, and investigators began connecting dots that had previously seemed isolated or insignificant. Despite the growing threat, Viper remained elusive. Her ability to predict moves and counter them almost in real time allowed her to stay ahead of both her enemies and law enforcement. She relied on an intricate network of informants, coded messages, and hidden safehouses. Even when raids occurred, evidence was destroyed or planted elsewhere, leaving authorities with nothing concrete to pursue. Her control over information was as formidable as her control over the streets, allowing her to manipulate perception and maintain an aura of untouchability. Yet the betrayal that sparked these events was not merely a threat to her operations, it was a psychological attack. Viper had built her empire on trust, fear, and respect, and the realization that one of her closest allies could betray her forced a reckoning. She became more ruthless, more calculating, and more secretive, conducting her plans with layers of deception that even seasoned law enforcement struggled to penetrate. Every action now carried additional weight, every decision a test of loyalty and foresight. Liverpool, a city already haunted by fear, now witnessed the subtle unraveling of its most dangerous criminal network. Violence flared, unpredictably. Rumors of internal conflict spread, and ordinary citizens sensed that something monumental was unfolding behind the city's closed doors. Viper, the woman who had seemed untouchable, faced the most dangerous opponent of her life, betrayal from within. And in the shadows the city held its breath, knowing that the coming weeks could change the balance of power forever, leaving scars that would remain long after the dust settled. After years of investigation, months of planning, and countless risks, the authorities were finally ready to strike. The sting operation had been meticulously orchestrated, designed to catch Viper in the act and dismantle the empire she had built from the shadows. Every detail had been rehearsed, every route analyzed, and every potential escape covered. The officers involved were aware that this might be the most dangerous operation in the city's history. Viper was not just another criminal to be apprehended, she was a strategist, a master of deception, and a predator who had outsmarted law enforcement at every turn. The stakes were higher than ever, and failure was not an option. The trap was set in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, chosen for its isolation and the control it offered investigators over the environment. A fake deal had been arranged, meant to lure Viper in under the guise of a major transaction. Every street leading to the warehouse had been monitored, escape routes blocked, and backup units stationed nearby. Surveillance cameras captured every inch of the approach, and undercover officers were positioned inside, ready to apprehend her the moment she entered. For months, intelligence had been gathered, patterns observed, and risks calculated. It was a plan designed to leave no room for error. On the night of the operation, Viper arrived with her usual calm and composed demeanor, as if she were attending one of her public events rather than walking into a trap. Every movement she made was deliberate, measured, and confident, reflecting the careful control she maintained over her empire. Investigators watched anxiously as she moved through the shadows, seemingly oblivious to the intricate web that had been set around her. At that moment, it seemed as if victory was within reach. Then, in an instant, everything changed. A hidden informant, whose loyalty had been overestimated, revealed the operation to Viper at the last possible moment. She paused briefly, assessed the situation, and vanished into the night with the precision and speed that had become her trademark. Officers rushed to intercept her, but the streets were already empty, leaving behind only chaos, confusion, and shattered plans. The sting, months in the making, had failed spectacularly. The aftermath was a mixture of frustration, disbelief, and grudging respect. Viper had once again demonstrated her ability to anticipate, adapt, and escape. Investigators were left to piece together the night's events, analyzing what had gone wrong and who had betrayed them. The city's criminal landscape shifted subtly in the wake of the failed operation, as rival gangs and law enforcement alike reassessed their strategies. Even in failure, Viper reinforced her reputation as untouchable, leaving both the police and her enemies aware that her influence extended far beyond what anyone had imagined. For Liverpool, the night of the sting became a legend whispered among those who followed the city's underworld. It was a reminder of the power and cunning that governed the streets, of the thin line between order and chaos, and of a criminal whose intelligence and foresight made her nearly impossible to capture. While authorities regrouped, Viper's shadow stretched longer than ever, a chilling symbol of control, danger, and the mysteries that still lurked in the city's darkest corners. Liverpool had learned once again that in a city of shadows, the predator often outsmarts the hunter, and the story was far from over. Liverpool never truly sleeps, and its shadows never truly vanish. Even after the failed sting operation, the city remained a labyrinth of secrets, corruption, and hidden danger. The underworld continued to hum with quiet activity, driven by ambition, greed, and the relentless pursuit of power. While Viper's empire had been partially disrupted, the network she had built was resilient, sprawling into the city's forgotten corners and adapting to the constant pressure of law enforcement. New players emerged, eager to claim territory, test loyalties, or exploit weaknesses, but they quickly learned that the streets of Liverpool were not easily conquered. The people of Liverpool had grown accustomed to the fear that permeated the night. Shopkeepers, residents, and even casual visitors moved through the city with caution, avoiding certain streets, scanning the shadows, and listening for sounds that might indicate danger. Every alleyway, abandoned building, and dimly lit corner held a story, a warning, or a secret. The city's darkness was no longer just an absence of light, it was a presence, tangible and threatening, shaping the behavior of everyone within its reach. Those who ignored it did so at their own risk, often becoming part of a story that would never be told in the newspapers or remembered by the authorities. The disappearances, the murders, and the turf wars had left scars that could never be erased. Families remained haunted by unanswered questions, friends whispered of suspicious sightings, and law enforcement struggled to understand the full extent of what had transpired. Cryptic messages, hidden symbols, and coded warnings suggested that the operations of the criminal underworld were far more organized than anyone had anticipated. The city itself seemed to have learned the rules of the game, where silence, observation, and caution were as necessary as courage. Even as the city adapted, the legend of Viper grew. Her ability to evade capture, manipulate her environment, and maintain control over such a sprawling network became the stuff of urban mythology. She was a ghost, a force that could not be contained, a reminder that power in Liverpool was rarely visible but always present. For those who sought to challenge the status quo, she remained a warning that intelligence, strategy, and ruthlessness often outweighed brute force. Her story was not just about crime, but about the shadows themselves, how they moved, how they controlled, and how they could never be fully understood. Yet there was a grim beauty in Liverpool's darkness, a rhythm that defined the city as much as its architecture. its river, or its history. The same streets that inspired fear also created resilience, forcing people to adapt, observe, and survive. Every abandoned building, hidden passage, and forgotten alley carried the weight of stories untold, crimes unsolved, and secrets that would never see the light of day. The city had become a living testament to the fact that darkness could coexist with life, that danger could be omnipresent yet unseen, and that the human instinct for survival was stronger than fear itself. Liverpool's After Dark world was far from over. While some believed that the reign of criminals like Viper might eventually end, the truth was far more unsettling. The shadows were eternal, the secrets endless, and the city itself a predator that never sleeps. In a place where trust is rare, betrayal common, and danger always close at hand, Liverpool continued to write stories that were darker, stranger, and more compelling than fiction. The city's true story remained hidden in plain sight, a testament to its fear, its resilience, and the chilling fact that some secrets are never meant to be uncovered.